And you may be saying to yourself, all this is fine and dandy, Jen, but when are you going to actually show me how to make the form work? None of this helps me if the form does nothing when I click the submit button. The example we have here is a simple HTML form, first name, email, and comments. And when you submit, nothing happens. And how is that useful? We're building a form. We want to collect the data. Well, the reason that I haven't covered it is because it can be very difficult to make forms work because you have to use more than just HTML. Most forms use at least JavaScript to submit the form. Sometimes they use scripts like PHP. I've written forms in C and C#. You can get forms that are written in ASP and other languages. It just depends. So if you really need a fancy web form, you're going to want to talk to your hosting provider and see what they have, because most of them have scripts that you can already use that you don't have to write your own. But for this example, there is one way to create an HTML form that is easy to do and fairly reliable. So we go into our HTML form, and in the form tag, we're going to add an attribute. We're going to say form action. The action is what you want the form to do. As you can see, my HTML editor is actually giving me some suggestions, but none of them are going to work because they're actually pointing to URLs. A form won't work if it's pointing to a URL. You have to point it to a mail to. And so we're going to point it to a mail to, and then you give it an email address. Now, a lot of people just do that and say, oh, I'm done. But it's a good idea to do more than that. So you need to add the method. Now, I always recommend starting with method get. What the method get means is it's going to submit the form data in the URL, like after a question mark. It'll say question mark, and then it'll have first name, and then equals, and then whatever form data was entered in the first name field, and so on. That's what method get does. Method post, the other option, that submits it via the HTTP request, and so it's not shown on the URL, and you won't see it. But I always start with get, because that's the one that's the most reliable with Mail-to forms. Then, as long as my HTML address is correct, I can save this document, and I'm going to preview it in Safari. And I'm just going to fill it out. Here's my form. And it opens my email. And if it's working, it'll put the form values in the email right here. As you can see, it didn't. And so we know, okay, this isn't going to work, so we'll try the other method. So we go back to our HTML, go back to our editor, and we'll change the method to post. Now, the reason I say it this way is because it changes. Some email clients work better with get. Other email clients work better with post. Some email clients don't work at all, so we're going to see what my email client thinks. So we'll say save the document, and we'll view it in Safari. Again, we're going to fill it out. Click submit. And apparently, my email client does not like HTML forms, so it doesn't work. So what you're seeing is exactly why this Mail-to method is not a reliable way to submit forms. But if your clients aren't using Mac, you should be fine using the GET request and your HTML form. So I'm going to change it back to GET because that's the one that usually works. And what this is supposed to do is open an email client and send the form data via email. The customer will still have to hit send because it's not done automatically, but at least the form data will be there. And this works about 80% of the time. As you can see, it doesn't work for me, but I don't generally use Mail-to forms, so I don't really care. If you want to find a more reliable way to submit forms, you should talk to your hosting provider and ask them for what's called a CGI or a form submitter. And they'll know what you're talking about, and they can point you in the right direction for a form that will work on your web hosting site. And that's how you get forms to work in HTML.